Kate Chopin's The Awakening, 1899, is a landmark novel in American literature and a foundational text in feminist literary history. Set in New Orleans and the Gulf Coast in the late 19th century, the novel tells the story of Edna Pontellier, a young wife and mother who gradually becomes aware of her own desires, identity, and need for autonomy in a society that restricts women's freedom. Controversial upon publication, The Awakening was criticized for its frank treatment of female sexuality and for its rejection of conventional morality. It was largely forgotten until its rediscovery in the 1960s during the rise of second-wave feminism. Today, it is celebrated for its lyrical style, psychological depth, and bold critique of gender roles. The novel traces Edna's emotional and sexual awakening as she breaks away from the traditional expectations of motherhood and marriage, only to find herself isolated and disillusioned. Through its tragic and ambiguous conclusion, Chopin explores the limits of female autonomy in a patriarchal world. Part 1. Grand Isle and the Awakening begins. The novel begins on Grand Isle, a vacation resort off the coast of Louisiana, where Edna Pontellier is staying with her husband, Léonce, and their two sons. Léonce is a successful, if inattentive, businessman who treats Edna more as a possession than a partner. He spends most of his time away, leaving Edna to socialize with other guests, particularly Robert Lebrun, a charming young man who traditionally devotes himself to a married woman each summer. Unlike the other women at the resort, especially Madame Ratignolle, who epitomizes the mother woman ideal, Edna is introspective and emotionally restless. She begins to question her role as a wife and mother, experiencing moments of deep longing and alienation. A pivotal moment occurs when Edna learns to swim, symbolizing the beginning of her awakening. The experience fills her with a sense of independence and power she has never known. Her emotional intimacy with Robert grows, and though they do not consummate their feelings, the bond awakens Edna to her own desires. When the summer ends, Robert abruptly leaves for Mexico, and Edna returns to New Orleans with her family. Part 2. New Orleans and Rebellion. Back in the city, Edna becomes increasingly discontented with her domestic life. She begins to reject her traditional roles, shirking household responsibilities, neglecting her social obligations, and asserting her autonomy. Her defiance alarms Léonce, who consults a doctor, Dr. Mandelet, suspecting mental instability. The doctor, while sympathetic to Edna's feelings, ultimately supports Léonce's authority and suggests patience. Meanwhile, Edna forms a friendship with the pianist Mademoiselle Rice, a fiercely independent woman and talented artist who encourages Edna's artistic pursuits. Mademoiselle Rice becomes a mentor figure, representing the possibility of a life devoted to art and self-expression, though at the cost of social isolation. Edna rents her own pigeon house, a small residence where she lives apart from her family. Her physical move marks a symbolic declaration of independence. She begins painting seriously and indulges in a brief affair with Alcée Arobin, a seductive bachelor, though she remains emotionally detached from him. Despite these freedoms, Edna continues to yearn for Robert, who returns unexpectedly. They admit their love for one another, but Robert, bound by the era's moral conventions, refuses to pursue a relationship with a married woman and soon disappears again. Conclusion: isolation and death. After Robert's final departure, Edna visits Madame Ratignolle, who is giving birth. The visceral experience reminds Edna of the constraints of motherhood and the demands society places on women. The scene deeply unsettles her. The next day, Edna returns to Grand Isle. Alone on the beach where her awakening began, she removes her clothes and walks into the sea. The novel ends with Edna swimming out into the water, an act that is widely interpreted as suicide. Her final thoughts recall childhood memories and the feeling of limitless freedom she once experienced in the sea. Whether she drowns in despair or achieves spiritual liberation remains an open and poignant question. Character analysis. Edna Pontellier. Edna is the novel's protagonist and a complex character whose journey from repression to awakening drives the narrative. She begins as a conventional wife, but gradually awakens to her individual desires and emotional depth. Edna is not a traditional heroine. She is selfish at times, emotionally impulsive, and not maternal. Yet Chopin presents her sympathetically, as a woman trying to discover her own truth in a world that offers her few choices. Her transformation is spiritual, sexual, and artistic. She seeks not just romantic love but self-possession, rejecting the identities others impose on her. Yet the very society that awakens her also constrains her, and her end reflects the tragedy of a soul unable to reconcile autonomy with reality. Léonce Pontellier. Léonce represents the patriarchal husband of the late 19th century. He is not cruel, but he treats Edna as a belonging, concerned more with appearances and propriety than emotional connection. He exemplifies a society that views women as wives and mothers first, individuals second, and his bafflement at Edna's behavior underscores the social blindness to women's inner lives. Robert Lebrun. Robert is the object of Edna's romantic longing. Though he awakens her emotionally, he ultimately retreats into convention, unable to defy social norms. He represents love within limits, a fantasy that fails to become reality. His inability to commit to Edna reveals that even men who admire women's independence can be complicit in their repression. Mademoiselle Rice. Mademoiselle Rice is a foil to Madame Ratignolle and a key figure in Edna's awakening. She is a single, childless artist who lives for her music. She is the only character who truly understands Edna's inner transformation. Her life offers a vision of female independence, but it comes at the cost of social isolation and emotional coldness. Edna admires her but is unsure whether she can fully embrace such solitude. Madame Ratignolle. A mother woman, Madame Ratignolle is warm, nurturing, and entirely devoted to her family. She contrasts sharply with Edna and represents the ideal of womanhood in Victorian society. Though kind, she cannot comprehend Edna's restlessness and warns her against impropriety, reinforcing the social expectations Edna seeks to escape. Themes and analysis. 1. Female autonomy and identity. The central theme of The Awakening is female selfhood. Edna's search for an identity outside of wifehood and motherhood. Chopin challenges the 19th century belief that a woman's place is in the home, and that her happiness must derive from serving others. Edna's refusal to conform marks her as both heroic and tragic. She wants to possess herself, body and soul, but the world around her refuses to allow such freedom without punishment or exile. 2. Marriage and motherhood as constraints. Marriage and motherhood are portrayed not as sacred institutions, but as restrictive roles that deny women agency. Edna does not hate her children or husband, but she resents the loss of self they represent. Her famous line, that she would give up her life for her children but not herself, reveals Chopin's radical insight. Women must have the right to define themselves independently of family or society. 3. Sexual awakening. Edna's sexual desires are central to her awakening. Her love for Robert and her affair with Robin are not mere romantic diversions, but acts of reclaiming her body and emotions. In a culture where female desire was taboo, Chopin's candid portrayal was revolutionary. Edna does not seek pleasure for a man's sake, but for her own, a concept that disturbed Victorian norms and alienated many readers at the time. 4. Art and self-expression. Art, particularly painting and music, serves as a metaphor for self-expression and freedom. Edna's growing passion for painting coincides with her search for identity. Mademoiselle Rice's music stirs Edna emotionally, opening her to new emotional possibilities. Yet artistic life also demands sacrifice, financial independence, solitude, and commitment, challenges Edna is not fully prepared to meet. 5. Nature and the sea. Nature, especially the sea, is a recurring symbol in the novel. The sea represents freedom, sensuality, and escape. Edna's first swim marks her awakening. Her final swim marks her liberation, or perhaps her surrender. The sea is also ambiguous, both a nurturing, womb-like space and a force of oblivion. It symbolizes the promise and peril of personal autonomy. 6. Social conformity and isolation. Edna's rebellion isolates her from society. Her neighbors disapprove, her husband is bewildered, and her lovers abandon her. She is caught between a world she rejects and a world that does not yet exist. Chopin suggests that true independence for women is nearly impossible in a society that refuses to accept it. The cost of nonconformity is loneliness, and Edna must choose between living a lie or facing that solitude. Symbolism. The sea represents freedom, sexuality, and the unconscious. Its vastness mirrors Edna's inner depths and desire for transcendence. Birds. Birds appear throughout the novel as symbols of entrapment and freedom. A caged bird at the start reflects Edna's confinement. A bird with a broken wing at the end symbolizes her vulnerability. The pigeon house. Edna's new residence, symbolizing freedom and nonconformity, yet also isolation and marginalization. Swimming represents self-discovery and empowerment. Edna's ability to swim is a metaphor for learning to trust herself. Narrative style and structure. Chopin's style is lyrical, restrained, and rich in symbolism. The novel is told in the third person limited, closely aligned with Edna's perspective. This allows readers to experience her psychological transformation intimately. The novel's structure is cyclical, beginning and ending by the sea, suggesting that Edna's journey, while profound, is ultimately constrained by the world she inhabits. Historical and literary context. Published at the end of the 19th century, The Awakening emerged during a time of strict gender roles and Victorian morality. Its exploration of female sexuality, individualism, and rebellion was scandalous, and the novel was largely dismissed or condemned. Kate Chopin, a widowed mother of 6, was influenced by French realism and naturalism, particularly the works of Flaubert. Her unflinching honesty, psychological nuance, and feminist themes placed her ahead of her time. The novel was rediscovered in the mid-20th century and is now considered a pioneering feminist text, studied for its progressive critique of patriarchy and its poetic evocation of selfhood. Conclusion. The Awakening is a profound exploration of female identity, autonomy, and desire. Through Edna Pontellier's emotional and psychological journey, Kate Chopin offers a searing critique of the societal norms that confine women and deny them the right to define their own lives. The novel's tragic end is not a failure of Edna's will but a commentary on the limitations imposed by a repressive society. Edna's awakening is ultimately thwarted not by weakness, but by a world that offers no space for her freedom. Today, The Awakening endures not only as a beautiful and tragic story but also as a powerful statement on the cost of female liberation in a world not ready to accept it.